Hey, hey. Thanks everyone for joining. Welcome to episode 6 of season 2 of People in Success. My name is Shreyas. I'm the head of marketing at Plum. As part of People in Success, we talk to leaders from across industries about talent, hiring, people success, and so much more. Today, we're talking to Sanam Rawal. She's a talent leader, startup advisor, and founding partner at Metamorph. For those of you who don't know, Metamorph is an HR advisory firm that's not just incubated with Bloom Ventures, but also exclusively works with Bloom's portfolio companies, helping them hire, manage their teams, and so much more. You're no stranger to the show, Sanam, but welcome.
Thank you, Shreyas. Excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for doing this with us. You've been a very integral part through, of course, the Talent Deck in helping us build People in Success Season 2. Even before we start, thank you so much for being a very integral and helpful part of this journey.
Anytime, always.
Awesome. Today, of course, we're talking a little bit about a very specific topic that Sanam, you are about the best expert there could anyone could be, which is about autonomy, right? And how it can help drive high performance in teams and more so startups. But before we get into it, obviously you're familiar with the icebreaker that we have, which is never have I
Mhm.
ever. So we'll play around with that. I hope you have a beverage of choice around.
Yes, I do. My
Awesome.
coffee. Yes.
Awesome, awesome. So I'll create a context. I'll say never have I ever given a thing, and if you've done it, then you take a swig or a gulp. Yeah, awesome. So first, never have I ever made an important independent decision that went south.
Oh my God, it's the first one. It's
Tell us a
bad.
little more.
It was my first year, and I was so excited to help the portfolio companies hire engineering talent that one of my friends was working in the Purdue University. So I asked him for the alumni list. He shamelessly gave it to me, and I sent out an email marketing to all the Purdue alumni from one year, X year to Y, saying that at that time we didn't have Passion Connect or Metamorph, so we just called Bloom's Talent Unit, and I sent it to everyone, saying that hey, if you're looking for a portfolio companies, it was just 50 companies then, and one of the Purdue alumni ended up being the LP who was one of the LPs in Bloom, and then he sent Karthik that
Wow,
email saying that hey, Bloom's hiring, then I'm interested, and it was a big debacle, and I just wanted to just sit in my room and cry all day. It was very bad.
wow, wow. And talk about
Yeah.
being young.
No,
Okay, second question. Never have I ever micromanaged my team during a project.
I have not even
Never.
once till
Wonderful.
never,
Yeah. Oh,
never.
so many of these never have I ever's. Gana and I, we put our heads together and make sure you drink your beverage. But this is probably the first time where you're avoiding that swing. But question number 3: never have I ever exercised a veto on a decision involving people and culture.
Oh, too many times. I played this too many times.
Tell us about the last instance you did this.
Just about our offsite. We are just doing an offsite soon, and as the everyone did all the HR stuff, including ordering the cakes and everything ourselves. And there was, and I keep calling her, my sort of finance person, because I'm so excited to do all of these things because this is the first time I have a team of 40 people, and she's always the one who's like telling me that, hey, listen, this is outside the budget, this is not okay. So recently, they asked me to, rethink the offsite, and she's like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And it's been a tough year, and blah blah blah. And I was like, "Hey, listen, no, like my team needs it. I need my team members to see each other. It's 40 people now. It's 4 cities. We have offices in. We can't continue this from a face-to-face scenario. I'm vetoing it. We have to have the offsite." And yeah, that was the one that happened. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Awesome. Now let's get into the meat of what we wanted to talk about, right? So Sanam, you've started your career in a very different manner. One of the reasons why we felt that you would be the person to talk to about people and the business of people is because at a very young age you were given a very large mandate, right, to run and scale a people, the people processes for Metamorph, and all of Bloom's portfolio companies. Walk us through the story. Tell us a little bit about how that transpired, what happened there.
Um, It's a very funny one. I was a recruiter in one of the executive search firms and didn't really relate to the way they were working. At that time, it was 2014 when when housing and all of these other startups had just come in, and we were obviously just as a typical executive search firm running behind the big ones and the big ticket sizes and trying to sort of hire for the most CXO positions and things like that. And I wasn't a big fan of it. I wasn't able to relate to it, and that's when I met the legend Alex Peter, who connected me to Bloom. And it was a very interesting thought process in Bloom because they were like, hey, listen, we don't know anything about HR, we don't know anything about recruitment. I was just 24 years old, but Karthik, Sanjay, and Ashish literally were like, you run it. And basically, we just want our portfolio companies to get as much support as possible because the other executive search firms aren't going to look at the teams that are the small. At that time in 2015, we had invested in all of the unicorns of Bloom's portfolio right now. So Dunzo was a 10-member team in our garage in Bangalore. We did the deliveries ourselves to try out the product. The Healthify Me had just gotten set up. Unacademy had just gotten set up. So had Cashify and many more, right? So the thought process was that get in and start hiring for yourself. And I said, hey, but is this a part of Bloom? And they said, no, we are a very small fund, we can't keep this a part of Bloom. Why don't we set up an advisory unit where you can run it as a revenue setup? You can charge our founders. So I was already a little taken aback because I was like, okay, but no other VC is doing this. How are we going to charge, and are they really going to work with me? And then they were like, yeah, but you have to try and help them hire. But I was 24 years old. I had no clue about running a business. They said, here's 27 lakhs. You like, go, like, do what you have to do. And it was such high level of belief and autonomy. I honestly still try to understand why, because I mean, I think the passion overtook everything because I was so excited to help early stage startups. It was such an integral part of me because I realized that people who have the money are going to get help anyways. These are the people who don't, and I want to try and help them. Plus the whole conviction of Bloom coming into the picture, because their skills, their sort of analysis of the industry got me a lot more confident of the fact that yes, Unacademy is going to do something, Dunzo is going to do something. So I was even more invested in it. That's when I started. It was quite a journey. I was 24. I didn't know how to go to a Gaurav Munjal or an Akanksha of Love Local and tell to them that, hey, listen, I know how to do this. I can do it for you. And then plus I was we were charging. So they were like, hey, why is Bloom charging? Bloom's giving us money and then they're charging. And then, well, how is this going to happen? But it turned out to be quite interesting because I feel like the approach here was more to do with I am an expert of what I do. I might not know a lot of things, but I'm going to learn it over the period of time. And most importantly, there is nobody who is ready to help you right now. I'm the one who has taken up the sort of challenge to do it. So why don't we work together in it? So the relationship with all of these founders, which is now 150 companies, ended up becoming a very, very personal, intrinsic, friendly sort of relationship, which gave me a lot more confidence, which is one of the things that I think today founders don't do well enough with their HRs, but we'll get into that in a bit. In the first week of me joining and setting this up, I had my first hire, which was a front-end engineer for Small Case, who now after 6 years, who I share my work anniversary with. He is now the VP engineering at Small Case right now, who stayed there till then. So there was a little bit about how we started, what we sort of ended up building. And of course, now we solve many more problems beyond talent acquisition for the founders. But yes, this was a little bit to it.
Wonderful, wonderful. What an interesting journey, right? All of 24, a few more lakhs than your age being put into a and given you and for this wonderful team to give you this level of autonomy and this level of responsibility also, right? For someone that young, how did you even plan what to do with that kind of money? How did you even strategize? How did that first 60, 90-day plan even look?
I think of course, the Bloom team helped me extensively, right? Because no one knew how this was going to end up being. We took it a little bit strategically in terms of teams that are founders that are willing to experiment with a situation like this, founders that will that Bloom can possibly sort of get to experiment. We also took into companies that currently need the help and are struggling, which would intrinsically allow me to work harder because they obviously realized why Sanam is doing this. And then we basically went deep into meeting the founders, understanding what their needs are. Because I was a one member team at that time, I took on the amount of work that was able to sort of that I was able to deliver with. Obviously, I came with a network because I was working in Antel till then, so I just sort of occupied the network as much as I could. But the larger sense of it went in really convincing these professionals to work with the companies. Because I mean, think about it, 6 years ago, is anybody going to come and tell you that you're going to be able to order a bread in like 2 minutes through Dunzo? Would you believe that? No one would. So and at that time you had like crazy companies like Housing, etc., who were giving like meals for free, and laptops, and like all of these like crazy offsites for free, which my founders didn't have the funds to do. So I think it went more into the whole concept of passion, and that's where the whole passion connect bit came into the picture. We started talking to Shreyash and started asking him, hey, like what exactly are you passionate about? Because Bloom had invested in ed tech, robotics, makeup, weddings, space tech, name it, right? So we basically told Shreyash saying that, hey, is your father a professor and you're really keen on edtech? Do you know that according to Bloom's analysis, an academy is going to do XYZ, or Class Plus is going to do XYZ? Do you really want to be like a big fish in a small sea, being the only product manager in an academy? You rather, in Flipkart, you rather be, a sort of like a person playing a lot more of a growth impact role in an academy. And that's how the whole bit ended up being. So the first out of the 7 years of Metamorph, the first 3 years went into instilling that in job seekers, where we told them that, hey, listen, it's not about money, will come through ESOPs. I mean, I know someone, one of the team members in Locus, who's ended up buying a Maserati because of the ESOPs that they got in the first 3 years. So my point was educating them to tell them that money will follow if you are in the right place at the right time. And this is the analysis that's going to show this industry is going doing this. So you should be here. And then that's what happened in the first couple of years, and that's how we were able to do it. The focus really wasn't money, to be very honest. It really wasn't. And I think those are one of the most important parts of autonomy, right? The focus has to be a lot more intrinsic in terms of what you are trying to do. It can't be just money, because your decisions then get a lot more hampered on the way you are trying to solve for whatever it is you're trying to solve. If the minute you bring money into the picture, your decisions end up being a lot more non-strategic and a lot more not sustainable in terms of the kind of business you're trying to build. But the minute you look for value and being able to create something new, that's when I think you go a little bit deeper into being able to solve this, I think. Yeah.
That's such an interesting point you brought up when you did touch upon budgets, right? So you've seen a lot of HR functions being set up from scratch. At least a lot of these now big name unicorns and even bigger, right? But on day one, on day 20, when they were still setting up their HR team, what did you think of their perspective around budgets, and now what is your now guide for HRs to think around budgets?
I think it is really broken from the time HRs and founders, for that matter, and I'll add founders to this list also, thinking about budgets, right? It's all so codependent currently on, oh, okay, and I have an investor backing me. This is the amount of money that needs to be set here, this is the amount of money that needs to be set there. And you are being strategic about it from the Excel sheet book point of view, but are you really being strategic about it in terms of what the budget is going to create an outcome of? And what exactly are you expecting it to be in that place, right? Like I'll give you an example. Like, it's a very, very raw example, but the industry has had a super sort of economical sort of crisis in the last 2 years, and this year especially more, funding winter and everything that's going on, and everyone's struggling majorly, hiring has stopped, and this has definitely affected us from an overall team point of view, especially in the year. And I'm being very candid, especially in a year where we expanded the most. We have 40 people now. There is no VC that has a 40 people only HR team till then, right? But being able to think about budgets, and then being able to think about the fact that I need my team to be more together right now than any other period, needs me to be able to make some budgetary decisions that are going to create an outcome of having them to stick around with me. Now this is a very very sort of not core concept to not a core example of what startups will be needing, but I think founders and HRs need to look at budgets a little bit more outcome driven than looking at budgets just because they're setting the budget. Hey, at the starting of the year we set the budget that this is going to be the budget for the kind of hires we have to make, and then really getting into the year and seeing what is happening, being able to have that flexibility to go back and try and change it as much as you can, because at least I had to, right? I was not given, I mean, the first year we started with 27 lakhs. I made the 27 lakhs and then I gave it back to Bloom. The second year we made a revenue of 62 lakhs. The third year went up to 99, and then now we are making 7 to 8 crores. And the thought process still remains that we never thought about budgets as, hey, this is what it needs to take to do X. It was more like, how much am I going to try to put into this to be able to have that outcome? And that is something that nobody thinks about. And I think if we can try and figure out a way to do this, obviously, listen, hey, I'm again, just as a overall scenario, I didn't have investors on my back. I did not have any of my capital involved in this, so I might be someone who's talking from a very different perspective. But at least for me, being able to set these budgets and go a particular way was very very heavily dependent on the outcome that the budget was driving from an overall fact.
Got it. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. I want to touch a little bit about specifically on hiring, right? And how that intertwines with the HR functions and the budget discussion that we've been having. The biggest spend for so many of these startups today is on people. It's not really on technology or any other form of capital investment. It's on people, right? The conversation around expensive engineers and how Bangalore has turned more expensive than the Bay Area, right? That's been such an active thread. There is a very common process now where, hey, as a hiring manager, for example, will tell the HR team saying, hey, this is my people requirement. This is what you folks need to help me build. And they'd go and have to build. But what is the level of autonomy that they should have? Right? In saying, no, you don't need this bigger team, or how at what point should they start exercising autonomy in operating from a company's budget perspective as well, right?
Yeah. I think honestly, with the experience that I have had, autonomy is something that is more intrinsic than it is then going and asking someone to give it to you. At least in my case, that was the scenario. Being able to show someone that not only can you deliver, but you can go beyond the given responsibilities, because there's an intrinsic need to succeed, not for the money but for the inner self to feel content. That is something that is very very important, which I feel everybody always takes a step back in being like, hey, the founder's going to tell me what to do, and then that's what I'm going to do because that's what is in my KRA, and that is what is going to be in my competency benchmarking, and that's what I'm going to do. But in reality, that really isn't, that can be very much overseen when it comes to the hustle of your entire startup space. Like, at least for me, I was in the other side. I was feeling like, hey, listen, they are really not overlooking anything. Am I going the right way? Should they be at least checking what I'm doing or what I'm not doing? I think the step towards really being able to show your founder or your senior that you are more invested in this entire journey, and you are moving towards a step where you don't need to be overseen into some decision making that you can take by yourself and be given a chance to fail. Now this is where the whole senior and founder bit comes into the picture. I was very, very fearless. Honestly, for me, it was like, listen, even if I fail, I'm gonna change my route and I'm gonna get here. And if I fail here, then this is where I'm gonna go. And this being fearless really added into the autonomy bit, because I was so fearless. I was so okay with making decisions so much faster, which I think HRs today are, HRs or anyone for that matter today in their level or role end up being very very scared of, saying, oh my god, what if I do the wrong thing? Because again, it's not the being scared of your senior, but it's more about what if I lose my job, right? But the kind of loyalty that Bloom showed me with the fact that was more in lines of the fact that, hey, listen, it's okay. And I made mistakes. I make tons of mistakes. Listen, I was 24, 25, 26. I didn't know anything. So I made so many mistakes that today we still laugh on with the team. I feel like it is more about being able to be fearless and show the founders that even if I make a mistake, I will make sure that I take care of it, and I learn from it, and I ensure that it won't happen again. And more importantly, using that relationship with your founder or senior to be able to tell them that, hey, listen, this is covered. I have taken care of it. No one takes a step ahead in being able to do so, because for us, jobs have today become a very I'm gonna get my salary and I'm gonna just be in a job, and okay, if I don't like this, I'm gonna go somewhere else, and it's become very easy. For me, I had absolutely no other way to be earning my salary, because I had made up my mind that, hey, listen, this is something I have to do. So according to me, it goes more into being able to create autonomy by showing your teams and your founders a little bit more towards you being more invested in this than them. And it might at the starting take a few more efforts than what you are going to be doing afterwards. Like for me now, I've reached to that stage where the effort is obviously there to scale it, but that trust and loyalty is that, hey, like Sanam's not going to go anywhere, because this is where she's found her calling. If you are not in a job that does not where you don't find your calling, I don't know what exactly are you doing here. And for me, these are some important factors to keep in mind to play autonomy, because once you reach that level of fearlessness and getting that loyalty from your company or founder, you are on a road that can never go back. Like, you will never be able to work in any other place, or you will never be able to see your job in that manner.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. You've seen a lot of companies, a lot of big names, like I said, like we were discussing, at a very early stage, right? I want to ask you if you could share some examples from your experience of companies which embraced autonomy for people, for managers, for senior leadership, and it resulted in impacting performance in a very positive correlation or in a very direct sense, right? Are there any examples that you think you could share?
There were many actually, and ironically, most again, which goes back to my point, most of the people who embraced being able to hire, at least from the hiring side, being able to jump on being able to take these like calls of hiring someone a lot more junior, for example, for that role, were the fearless decisions that our founders made very early on, which they probably I don't know if they still do it today, but I have seen Nishit of Locus, for example, be able to choose someone for the role based on ability and capability than choosing on experience. This is something that I actually learned from him and implemented it, where I realized that someone who has the grit and the ability but has not yet found it can do 10 times more volume of work for you than someone who's experienced and knows how to do it. This is something that I see Nishit do very, very well, which I have loved. Kabir from Dunzo ended up hiring a very, very junior, starting engineering team that also started with after multiple sort of, discussions on how to be able to set this up and do it. I loved that fact that he was ready to give a chance, which again goes back to the scenario that the younger you are, the more money you will put on people who you believe is going to end up doing it for you. That it also was another thing that I really enjoyed. The person that I was talking about who bought the Maserati, by the way, also was a 28-year-old in Locus, who ended up joining very early on. So that was another example. All in all, I think, yeah, this is at least for example, in my team as well, I have seen we have a very, very young team. I have seen 24-year-olds be able to close 1.52 crore roles with our portfolio companies, more than what any executive search firm would be able to do, or give a chance for a 24-year-old to be able to do this for. So I think a couple of these examples were the ones that were the most striking in my opinion, but there are like many more that the earlier stage companies today are doing as well, that Bloom has invested in the Fund 3 and Fund 4, which I think do take similar steps in being able to look at situations a lot more than what the basic traditional ways of looking at it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, and in all modesty, you chose not to you didn't choose to cite Metamorph as an example, which I think is would have been a fantastic case in itself. But I want to jump into autonomy as a core concept, right? Like, it's about we've established that there are multiple examples, multiple instances where autonomy has a very direct impact on performance. It has on employee engagement, it has on employee retention, it has on hiring practices, it has on taking audacious goals. We've established that through the examples. But I want to understand, how do you see companies, especially young ones, building a culture of autonomy, preparing for autonomy for their eventual growth?
Yeah, I keep telling my founders this. At least from my experience, I've broken it down to three steps, which is very, very important, right? So one is the need of competence. If you are in a place where, if you understand the psychology of autonomy, you are in a place where the human desire is to control the environment effectively, to know how things will turn out. The minute you hire people who either figure out a way to know how things will turn out or already know how things will turn out, this need for competence is something that should be your step number one to autonomy. Being able to give someone that time and also that space to be able to figure it out by themselves, and also create that need of competence, saying that, hey, I took time but I reached here and I know that I'm competent enough to do this now. That is my step number one, which I usually tell them. My step number two is the very important one from the founder point of view, is along with the need of competence, you also need a need of belonging, or the need of relating to something. This is where the whole founder and the brand comes into the picture. If you have the need of like figuring out how things will turn out, you need to care enough about the people or relate to the people or the brand enough to want to be able to become competent there. I mean, if I don't care about my founder or my journey or my passion, I'm not going to work hard towards failing or succeeding, irrespective of the outcome, right? So for me, that ends up being number two. And the number three and the last one is the need to succeed, which is, or need to know how to turn things over, the need to belong somewhere, and then the last one being the need for autonomy. Basically, instead of defining autonomy as independence or the freedom, autonomy should be defined as controlling the course of one's life, which means that if you are being able to control the way things are doing, at least for me that was the scenario, right? No one was there to really see how I'm doing things, but if and my need for competence was so much that I needed to succeed in in my sort of professional path, and I belonged so much to the Bloom ecosystem because I cared so much about the entire ecosystem. Controlling the path of where this is going was very, very easy for me. And if founders are being able to break these three down, it becomes a lot more easy to be able to create autonomy. But it's a slippery slope. You can end up giving autonomy and then be in a place where someone feels super left out, unguided, unmentored, and you have to be able to balance that really, really well. But at least if you break it down in these three ways, I think for me those are the most important parts for a founder to be able to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. I'll just take a pause to say we've got some fantastic, interesting questions in the comments already. We'd love to take a few more, and we'll take those towards the end. But I'll just like to go back to Sanam on one very curious thing that I personally have just come across. There's this fantastic debate around flexibility versus autonomy, and there was this beautiful HBR article around it about how uh, employees are not craving flexibility, they're actually craving autonomy. While companies are trying to think about how best we can define policies on defining flexibility,
Yeah.
it's actually autonomy that these employees are craving. And autonomy for them is defined as the ability to define flexibility for themselves.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it plays to your point where you said it's about being able to exercise control over your own growth. It's not just about the freedom of operating. It's
Correct.
about doing things without, in a way that you deem the best to be fit.
Yeah,
Um, no, that makes so
I
much
agree.
sense.
And I also think that it's at least in my opinion, which also my HR and my other team members don't agree. At least in my opinion, founders and companies are trying to be so culturally fit or working so hard towards giving employees so much in terms of all the kind of policies and all the kind of flexibilities, that what the core fundamental of a psychological need of autonomy is being missed, because they don't want to be it's not necessary that they want to be sitting at their home and working remotely. It's that if you have given them a task, they want to be able to reach to the end of the task in a free manner. So it really doesn't matter, you're focusing so much on other things like, or being able to stay at home, or becoming remote, or working on a hybrid model, or giving someone the freedom to not travel from a very far place to your office. But really, if you are being able to give a job satisfaction through letting them reach their end result in whatever way they can, I think that is so much more important, which usually HR and founders end up overlooking. Because, and naturally so, I think it's not so much of their fault, but if you are in such a hurry in this competitive market to not let your head of engineering or your very important data science person go, that you want to do everything you can to be able to give him or her whatever it is. But I think the focus needs to be more in terms of showing them the core of the growth that they need to be involved in. And but also, like, again, like I said, right, it's not just about the HR or founders. You need to as an employee intrinsically want to grow and want to succeed. And once you club these two things together, that's when you can really see the magic happen. But if you're going to think that you're just in a job where you are very happy being remote, or working from home Thursdays or Fridays, and you're very happy and very comfortable where you are, then you are not going to, then it's unfair to expect a founder or HR to put in that much for you. Like, at least the comfort zone is somewhere where everybody just gets really, really happy with. At least for my case, I was in an extremely uncomfortable situation. My salary was more connected to the profits that I was ending up making. So I was like, oh my God, like, I need to do this, like, and I need to get to this, right? That intrinsically came. But if it won't come for others, then it's unlikely. You'll be fighting this always. You'll feel that you're not given enough when the founders and HR are giving you enough, but they can't see you doing so much. So it sort of has to become a little bit of a combination for me.
Yeah, no, I hope you've recently read the article that we published on our publication Humanize
Yeah,
around cost to company
absolutely.
versus cost to individual. I
Yeah.
think we've had a lot of interesting thoughts based on that idea. But Sanam, I want to touch upon, we've established that companies want to give autonomy. Like, leaders also want to give autonomy. Autonomy is good in terms of performance. Investors like Bloom obviously encourage autonomy. It's now an established, well grounded practice. How does an employee demonstrate that? How do candidates who are in the process of interviewing with companies showcase that in their interviews?
I think there are many ways doing it, but a couple of ways that I have always suggested is, don't look at an interview process just as an interview process. You're not just here to answer questions and show what you're doing. You will have to go a step beyond. Now, this is a problem. Everybody at least everybody in the industry, or everywhere in India for that matter, goes a step beyond when there is a incentive linked to it. No one wants to go a step beyond when there's nothing linked to it. For me, go a step beyond irrespective of the outcome, and the outcome is anyways going to come, which means if there's an interview, I at least encourage people to think about the gaps that they have found in the interview process that the company is trying to solve through your role. And without being asked, irrespective of the assignment you're giving, without being asked, create your own 60-day plan on what exactly you're going to do in the 60 days, and which are the areas of the gaps that you're going to fulfill. When you're having the last call with the founder, show him that, and show him what exactly you're trying to do. The minute the founder sees that you have already taken a step ahead to do it, the founder is going to be like, hey, what, even if I don't think this is the right way, I'm going to give it to you. Instead of 60 days, you do it in 40 days, but do it and show it to me. I think that is one of the ways that I would say really creates that way, because that's what, like, at least I did, because we didn't know how to do this in Metamorph or Machine Connect or whatever it was. So I created a plan saying, this is what my 1 year plan is going to look like. And it wasn't a very over the mountains plan. It was a very like, acha, 27 lakhs mein ho jayega, I can do it, I'll do it sort of a scenario. So I think if you take that step, and reach to a place where you're showing it, you don't have to be right, you don't have to be strategic. It can be very off from what the reality is, but the fact that you are thinking and investing the time without being asked is going to make a much more of a difference for the founder, to instill that in him, thinking that, hey, okay, listen, I'm going to give that to the person, right? And this can be in any business function. You can do it in whatever it is you're getting hired for. One of the ways is this, that I personally really like, and I encourage my team. I always, like, for example, as an HR, I always have a bonus question in my assignment, just to see if someone is really doing it or not. And I specifically mention, hey, it's this bonus question, it's non-mandatory, but it always makes a difference for me when someone tries it, even if they have done a shoddy job with the outcome. It makes me feel like, hey, if I'm gonna make the person do something extra, this person is gonna take it up, and that move is a very important one, at least for me. So I think these would be two like very basic ways to try and do it in your usual daily life.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go back to my team now. And my one learning through this conversation, Sanam, is saying, A, please add an extra question, a bonus question. But what I'm actually learning is, when agency that's
Yeah.
demonstrable from candidates meets autonomy, that's where the magic happens, right? Like the solution for
Yep.
magic is with hiring and nurturing and engagement and building for success is when high agency in individuals is met with the opportunity to be to exercise autonomy from the leadership.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic learning. I feel like so many of the people here would resonate with that, especially those of us who've been at startups for the
Yeah.
better part of our careers.
And don't
Saram,
don't
I
miss the
want,
fear. Don't miss the fear. That's more important. Like till
yeah,
today, with the 40-member team, I am absolutely fearless. I mean, tomorrow that anything can happen, and someone is, anything I promise to anybody, and I'm not able to deliver, or the person is not able to deliver to me. I am prepared, and I have that in me to say that, hey, I gave you the floor. You did what you had to, and if you were not able to sort of get the outcome, I'm completely okay with it. I think this also needs to be given back to them, because then it's unfair to expect them to go extra when then you can't complain about them not being able to do it.
yeah, no, psychological safety of failure is such an important part of building
Yeah.
culture and building a high agency, high performance culture. That too.
Yeah.
Perfect, beautiful. I want to come back. I mean, obviously, we are in an imperfect world, and a lot of people leaders or people managers don't get the level of autonomy that they would like, or don't get the level of autonomy that they deserve, perhaps. How does one go about asking for it from management? Is it
Yeah.
the one thing that you shared was go prepared? We have a plan.
Yeah.
What in addition would you say is a great way for you to command more autonomy from your leadership?
Yeah. I think the first step towards it is realizing and wanting it. That's very important, which people don't. I mean, you're so used to being in a place where you're happy the way you are and you're in your comfort zone that you don't realize that, hey, for me to shake things up and actually grow in my role, I have to be in an uncomfortable place. What's going to make me be in an uncomfortable place is taking up something that I don't know how to do, but I'm going to do it and learn all the way and be fearless. So one is realizing that. Second is, I mean, look at the amount of content that is out there in terms of how to negotiate a salary better, how to ask for a better salary, how to be better at negotiating your fighting out for a counter offer. There is just such little on how to ask for autonomy, and I think the first way to do it is just basically go and tell your team member or a founder saying that, hey, listen, this is something I want to take up. This is something I want to do. And obviously, you are expecting too much if you are in marketing and you want to suddenly do it in sales, right? Like, be a little bit realistic on where you're asking for it. And but you again, you need to know what you want to solve. Let's say if I'm in the marketing place and there's something that I really want to solve that's beyond my business function or in my sort of role, going a step ahead and telling the founder, hey, I don't know whether I'm going to be able to do it, but this is something I want to do. Is there a possibility that maybe we can experiment on it, try it, and see if I'll be able to do it? You would be surprised on the amount of times the people are going to come and say yes, only because of the eagerness of seeing you do it. It's just that most amount of people don't want to be in that uncomfortable situation, or also realize that you'll have to do extra work for it. Which is why you're not taking it up, and everybody just wants to do what they are given to do, but no one wants to do that something extra. If your founder says no to that and saying that, hey, listen, this is our deadline, you have to finish this and do it, and then you'll be like, okay, fine. If there is a time in the year that it is a more of a relaxed time, can I take it up then? And then make sure that you're taking it up, and then possibly ask in that manner. Honestly, I mean, if today anybody in my team, I mean, just last week, two of my team members ended up telling me, hey, we don't do any kind of CSR or any charity or anything. Can we please start, at least for any closure, like we've done 1,000 closures, at least for any closure after 1,000 closures, can we have someone plant a tree for us in the rural area or something of that sort? The fact that someone is coming up to me and coming and telling me that they want to do something like this still makes me feel like, okay, maybe it might not be this, because I don't know where they're planting the tree, etc., and I'm a little weird about it. What if we end up doing something else, and it still sprouts an idea that will lead to something? maybe it might not be that reason. So I think these would be some ways that I would, encourage people to go and ask. But the start is just to ask. I think that's your first
Yeah.
way of going.
So in many ways, autonomy is something you command. Autonomy is something you earn, and you're
Absolutely.
not given.
Absolutely. I mean, there have been times that it has not been given to me, in spite of this overly autonomous role. There have been times that they have said no, and I have my, like aggressive young self was like, hey, no, like, listen, I'm gonna do it this way, and they are like, hey, listen, it's the wrong way. Like, don't do it. And I said, and I've gone against them, and I have done it, and then it has been the wrong way, and I've had the, the sort of presence to go and tell my team, saying that, hey, listen, I did it, and it's not the wrong, it wasn't the right way, it was a wrong call, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to make sure I'm not going to do it again. Realizing that too and being ready for that mentally is also something that I think is very, very important, because there's a likelihood that you might not go through with it, for sure.
Yeah. No, that's so interesting, right? From this standpoint, now let's say I've gone and as a new person, I've sought autonomy. I've made a
Yeah.
big case for it. What are the guardrails that the management can put in to make sure that I'm set up for success with this newfound autonomy?
Yeah, I think um, super regular like check-ins, at least at the starting couple of months, Bloom spoke to me very often, and ensured that I was going the right way. They also gave me a lot of frameworks that I adapt to still today, in terms of how to run a business, how to do XYZ part of my role, that I very clearly knew I didn't know how to do it. So I went and told them, saying that, hey, these are the things I know I can do, these are the things that I don't know, so I will need help in being able to do these XYZ things. So regular check-ins is very important, because the minute you give autonomy, the people have sudden freedom, and you can go very wrong with sudden freedom, you can go very wrong with being left alone. So regular check-ins and overseeing, right, just ensuring in a way where you're not asking the person, hey, what are you doing every day, what time did you leave office, what time did you come in, but more in terms of, hey, this is the project we were working on, where have we reached. Your communication entirely changes, because you are putting forth a question that is not questioning their work, but asking more in terms of making them think. Like, at least the Bloom folks really made me think, in terms of, hey, what if you can solve it by X and not by Y, because I think the outcomes of Y is there. So you'll have to be a little bit invested in whoever it is that you're giving autonomy to. So that was one of the ways. The second way is, and also ends up being a little bit more towards, what exactly are you reaching to. If that is not clear, then you are in a place where you've given autonomy, but you don't know where you're going. That is very important. So a very clear end goal, like for me, they had not given me an end goal, but I had put my own end goal, saying that, hey, this year we have to have a target of 5 crores. So for me, the entire year was split into being able to reach that target, and I was very clear on what to do with my autonomy, because this is how I'm going to do it. But if there is a place where you don't have an end goal, then you're just going to be floating, and that is one of the slippery slopes of autonomy. So being able to have an end goal, and giving the person the end goal, and ensuring that there is enough steps to be able to meeting them towards that end goal. And also, I think the last thing is, showing, like, if you're giving 100% trust, like showing 300% trust. Like, I think motivating people to make them feel that they can do it is already you reaching a step ahead for them being able to do it. Because the minute you have a mentor who thinks that you can do it, you feel like, psychologically, you feel that you cannot let this person down, because this person is the only one who has trusted you with this. Makes the person feel like, I have to do this for them, and you are instilling this need of having to give back to your mentor, which works very, very well, because then the mentor trusts you, and then you have to make yourself competent enough to deliver to that end goal. So if you're going through this phase, like the way it's cut into it, you end up sort of having the person reach to it really well.
Got it. My equation that I just came up with, that I concocted in my mind like a couple of minutes ago, I think is now already metamorphing, sorry, into into saying the magic is when agency doesn't just meet autonomy but also accountability, right?
Correct.
It's also
Absolutely.
about driving, making sure people feel a certain sense of accountability towards the autonomy that they've been given,
Absolutely.
through regular check-ins and the coaching and the and the recommendations that they get and the quick feedback that's being given as a collective as opposed to a
Yeah.
task and a responsibility.
Absolutely.
That's a very interesting perspective. Perfect. I think this is a great segue into one of the questions that we've just got from the audience, where we are asked how much autonomy is too much autonomy, right?
Yeah.
At what point do you say that this is I need to bring in the big guns? I need to bring in someone else to help me take this decision, right?
I think when one of the check-ins turns into a outcome of repeated, not enough sort of movement forward towards what we're going to. For me, that would be a time when I would have to bring someone else into it. Maybe to make realize that I am seeing it wrong, or maybe to realize that the person is not ready, and we have to try and guide the person more than what we thought we could. Does that mean that you take the autonomy away? No. Does that mean that the person has the chance to grow into the role, but just with a little bit more help? Then probably yes. For me, that would be the time, which is why the check-ins are very, very important.
Got it. Yeah. And it also plays to the point of accountability and making sure that's
Right.
there throughout.
I mean, you cannot possibly think you're going to get autonomy without being accountable for something. Then you're in some other la la land, which is not going to work.
Yeah.
Which means that again, I would divide up. If you're taking the example of the 5 crores at the end of the year, I would divide that up per quarter and then have a quarterly checkup with everyone saying, "Hey, okay, this is how much we've ended up making. I can't. We didn't make it because of X, Y, Z. I need help on how to be able to make it." And then communicating that to the founder or whoever it is to say that, "Hey, these are the things that I'm facing a problem with." Most of the times, people are so scared that they're given autonomy that they can't speak up and they can't say that I am facing trouble. The minute you say that, the founder either brings someone else to overlook you, or gives it to you by themselves, and then you can figure out a way to be able to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How do you fix a scenario? How do you address a scenario where autonomy has gone wrong? Or autonomy was given to somebody and they weren't really able to make the best of it?
So if you are giving autonomy, you like I said, already are prepared that it might go wrong. So that is already one step forward. If it has gone wrong, then you address it in a manner where you being able to tell the person that, hey, maybe XYZ is not the right way to go. ABC is the right way to go. Why don't we put a pause to XYZ and try ABC? Here is a more extended deadline for you. Why don't you try that out? These are the other suggestions that I have for you to be able to deliver your project. And if there is something that please feel free to come and tell me. Still, you are not instilling a sense of having them be the minute you reply like this, you're still not letting them know it's fear. So you're still not making them feel like, hey, you did wrong, and you messed up, and yet no problem, we are still open to trying another way, because in your mind you're already prepared that it's not going to go the way you might think. So that preparedness already changes the way you're going to see the situation. A really bad reaction to it being wrong, saying, oh, I gave you autonomy, I knew you might not be able to do it, but you still do it, is going to make the person feel underconfident, which is the last thing you want to do, because autonomy still means overlooking and giving them the freedom, but guiding them. And that is a very important part that you should remember. You can't think that the person's going to be able to do it. So I think if you can address it in that manner and still give them a chance, it would be a more helpful way for the outcome.
Got it. The last question from the audience is getting autonomy good for someone early in their career? Like how do you embrace this? Who somebody who's relatively inexperienced, somebody who's still just maybe a fresher, how do you give them autonomy, and should you even give it to them?
I think be a little bit smart in terms of the projects you're giving the person autonomy to, and the level of capability that you see in the person. Interviews are not just interviews where you're sitting and asking, oh, tell me about yourself, or tell me what do you do as a hobby, you play football. That's really not what you should be doing in an interview. An interview should be able to tell you the capability level of the person, irrespective of their experience. So if I have an associate in my level, which would be the earliest level in Metamorph, and if the associate has a maturity and the ability to pick up a lot more faster that I can gauge in the interview, then the level of autonomy that I would give the person as compared to someone else would be a little bit more. But I'm very strictly evaluating it because I know they're early in the career and I know that they are inexperienced. But definitely give them autonomy. I don't think autonomy has anything to do with experience or ability or not. It has to do with you being able to gauge whether the person is going to create that outcome for you or not. It's very, very important. But there is no start or end to the career of autonomy. If that would have been the case, I would have never gotten it. So I don't think that has anything to do with it. But you got to be smart. Don't set up someone for failure. It's very important that you don't do that. Don't be unrealistic in what you're expecting in the thoughts of autonomy. Maybe guide them towards being in a place where they see and learn how to do it. The minute you do that, everything else is automated, because then they know how to be able to work under autonomy. Like, for example, we work on a hybrid model from Monday to Wednesday. Monday to Wednesday we are in office, and Thursday and Friday we are at home. So from COVID, there's a very strict check-in. All my friends really make fun of me, and my family too. But every day 9:30 there is a check-in. You will meet your team leader. You will talk to the team leader, no matter where you are, no matter what night dress you're wearing, or where you're sitting in your house or wherever it is. You will talk to your team leader. You will have a chat of what are the things you're supposed to do in the day, and at 6 o'clock you will check in again to say what are the things you have done or not done. Doesn't mean that the things you're supposed to do by 6 o'clock you've not done and that's a problem. No, the fact that we know that this is the level of autonomy that we've given you. You're sitting at home, you're not overlooked by anyone, but you're going to do it, is controlled by knowing how easily is the person slipping by. If in a week or in 2 weeks the person, we feel repeatedly Thursdays is late for their check-in or has not been able to do the work, it's already a red flag for us. So irrespective of the experience, if you are being smartly putting in timelines for this, I think that would work very well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ashish, you know Sanam well enough to not have asked that question. All of 24, given all the autonomy in the world, I think she's the best example of someone who was given autonomy early in their career and really went on to do the best with it. Those are mostly the questions we have from the audience also, Sanam. I want to, before we part, right, for the evening, I want to ask you your one-line advice for anybody in a people management or a leadership position around introducing, cultivating, and building autonomy within their teams and what it can mean for them.
I think I would say don't be afraid to ask, but be fearless in being able to reach your outcome wherever you are or whatever you're doing. Asking and communicating is a very important part of autonomy. But also being able to be fearless to reach the end goal is very important. The minute you have both of them in a balanced manner, I'm certain no matter where you are, you will be able to get that. More importantly, it's not as fancy as a quote, but it's the real way of being able to do it. This is the only way. If you are feeling you want autonomy, ask. If you're given the autonomy, deliver. And you will always be seen as that person who delivered. And I think that for me is the most important bit to it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Sanam, there are a few more questions in the comments. I'm going to ask you, because since we are a little short on time, can you please also respond to them post the event?
Sure, for sure. I will.
Perfect. So thank you everyone for joining. It's been a wonderful conversation, Sanam. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this, for giving us all the gyan on thinking through autonomy, thinking about autonomy, and how to build for it at a startup. It's been a pleasure hosting you, and it's been a pleasure working with you on People in Success throughout the season. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining in.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Shreyas. Enjoyed it.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.